motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Former champion Regis Prograis has been made to wait and is willing to suffer for his art. He's going to be fighting Jack Catterrall. Last time we saw Regis, he didn't look too hot. It was a bad style matchup for him against Evan Haney. In some ways, this is a bad style matchup for him too. On July 18th, Regis Prograis was sweating it out in Vegas, his family vacationing in Brazil, while he put in long hours in the gym preparing for an August 24 bout with Jack Catterrall. But word came down that the fight was off due to a Catterrall injury. Devastated might be the word to describe how most would have reacted, but from Prograis, figure pissed off to be the appropriate phrase.
It's in the UK.
I've truly invested in myself for this training camp, Prograis said. I was working my ass off in Vegas, setting up camp, paying for everything. Every day I was busting my ass and watching Jack's fights before I went to sleep. And now this happens. It is very upsetting. In the meantime, expect Prograis to stay in the gym and stay sharp and perhaps get started on the sequel to his book, Stories and Lessons from Regis Prograis, which was published back in April. Actually, that work has already begun. Right now, we're just documenting everything, Prograis said. The same person that wrote the book with me, his name is Ross Williams, and he's actually a childhood friend, so he's already documenting all the stuff for the second one right now. If you know Prograis, you're well aware that he's a unicorn in the boxing business, a well-read historian who doesn't just appreciate the old school, but is doing his best to bring that attitude into the modern day. You can talk to my parents, he said. They'll tell you that I always did the opposite thing. One of my coaches told me, if you want something nobody else has, you have to do something nobody else does. So I'm not going to do the same thing. I look at the crowd and it's like, all right, I see what they're doing and I'm going to go a different way. I'm not going to do all the stuff that they are doing. I'm my own man and I'm going to do what I want to do. And I feel like when it's all said and done, I'm going to accomplish some special things in boxing, but it's going to be the way I want to do it. Now, he's already a two-time super lightweight champion. He's already been a champion 2 times at that weight.
The Jack Catterrall fight is not a title fight per se.
But what you figure is that if Regis Prograis, who's currently ranked at number 7 via the WBO's ranked standings, if he takes on Jack and beats him, Jack, who's ranked at number 2, Regis may be elevated to number 1, moving past Arnold Barboza.
Teofimo's still WBO champion.
But Teofimo's been talking about moving up in weight, moving up to welterweight. And if he does, it's conceivable he may vacate his WBO title, at which point it would become available for a fighter like Regis or Jack, whoever wins.
Title might become available for one of them to fight for.
And so, Regis Prograis has been writing a book while still being an active fighter, and even a trip to the hottest place in the country for a summer training camp that emphasized suffering above all else. Suffering he didn't expect Catterrall to be experiencing. He's not, said Prograis earlier this month. I know he's not. No way. If he's suffering, he'll have the heat on non-stop. But even that won't work because it's just not the climate. We're doing the mountains and all that stuff, so I definitely don't think he's suffering, I'm suffering. Of course it's physical. Triple-digit temperatures guarantee that, but for the 35-year-old Louisiana native, the physical part of the toll is only part of the story.
It's an uphill battle for Regis Prograis because stylistically, Jack has the right style for the job, and in terms of location, Jack will have home field advantage. It's going to take place in the UK.
Most of it is mental, Prograis said. To know that I'm doing all this stuff every single day, I'm suffering every single day, like today, I woke up at 5 a.m., had to go hit the pool at 6, and then it's just really hot. As soon as you wake up, it's just really hot all the time. And then you go to the gym, and it's really hot, and I'm just putting in all this work, and then I have to go to work out again. I just know he's not doing what I'm doing. He can't be.
Regis can't leave it in the judge's hands. Not in the UK.
He's got power. He's always had power. Regis Prograis has always been a very strong puncher. But in his last fight, his power was neutralized. He was disarmed by the long jab and movement, elusiveness of Devin Haney. He faces a similar challenge in Jack Catterrall in the sense that Jack is a jabber, Jack is a mover, Jack is cerebral.
Regis doesn't mind traveling, though.
Needless to say, traveling to the UK to face the local hero is not an issue. Going on the road has never been one for Prograis, who was handed his first pro loss by Catterrall nemesis Tosh jailer at London's O2 Arena back in 2019.
He's fought on the road before, but he's lost on the road before, so he has to take away something from that experience.
Can't leave it in the judge's hands. At the end of the day, a fight is a fight, Prograis said. It's two men fighting. Yeah, you have a lot of distractions, and the first time I went to face Taylor, I did some things that I learned from. Not saying I probably shouldn't have done them, but I did some things that I learned from. So the first time, you live and you learn. But now I'll be adjusted, and I'll feel like the people over there love me. Obviously, I won't be the hometown favorite, but the people in the UK, they appreciate boxing, and they love good boxing. Good boxing is what Prograis has always delivered, and after coming up the hard way, he's been sitting among the elite at 140 pounds for much of the last decade. He has a pair of world titles to prove it, but he's not done yet. There's another book to write and another title or titles to win, so he keeps suffering for his art. You never get control of the future, but right now, my goal is to become a 3-time world champion, he said. That's something I really want, but I really feel like that's going to come way earlier than last time. To become a 2-time world champion, it took me 3 years. I don't feel it's going to take another 3 years to become a world champion. So I do feel like that's going to come. Then, after that, unified champion, probably have a big fight in New Orleans, in the Superdome. That's how I see it now. I might surpass that, but that's kind of how I see it right now.
Can he do it?
He is at a disadvantage in more ways than one, stylistically and where the fight is taking place.
Don't forget he's coming off a loss.
A lopsided points decision loss to Devin Haney, who really isn't a strong puncher, doesn't land with much authority, but just staying behind his jab, moving and keeping Regis at arm's length was enough to take his power away.
It was enough to disarm him.
Regis' sweet spot is mid-range to inside when he's working off the counter, and he is a talented counter puncher when he can get the counters off. The problem is against the jabber, a mover, you don't get that many opportunities to counter.
Guy who's staying on the outside shooting singles.
You don't get that many opportunities to counter. That's why he lost to Devin Haney, and that's why he's facing an uphill battle with Jack Catterrall.
Fight's been rescheduled.
Supposed to go down this month. Now it's going down in October. More time for Regis to think, more time for Regis to prepare, because it's an uphill battle.
Regis is strong. He's plenty strong, but
Jack's a good fighter. Where Regis is coming off a loss, Jack is coming off a string of wins, a string of victories.
he's got momentum.
It's hard to imagine that Regis wins this fight with anything short of a knockout on foreign soil. As the away fighter, he needs a knockout.
It's the only way.
Elsewhere in the super lightweight division, news broke yesterday that reigning WBC champion Alberto Puello and Spain's own Sandor Martin have reached an agreement. The fight between the World Boxing Council super lightweight champion Dominican Alberto Puello and Spaniard Sandor Martin is set, as the parties have agreed to terms for the mandatory defense of the World Championship. In his most recent fight, Puello, 23-0 with 10 KOs, was crowned interim 140-pound champion after defeating Gary Antoine Russell by way of a points decision. He was subsequently named absolute champion after Devin Haney was named a champion in recess. For his part, Sandor Martin, 42 wins with 3 losses, no draws with 15 knockouts, saw action last December, knocking out Mohamed El Marcucci in a fight held in Italy.
This fight sucks.
Alberto Puello is best described as a boxer, a mover, a thinking man's fighter, and the exact same thing can be said about Sandor Martin. So when you put those two styles together, the boxer versus the boxer, you're not going to get a fan-friendly fight. You're not going to get a fan-friendly affair. And I know that there are some fight fans out there that like the cerebral fighter, the mover, the jabber, the thinker, the outboxer.
Oh, you're fancy, huh?
Yes, I am a connoisseur of the sweet science.
Pardon my monocle when I say that I'm not partial to the outboxer, quite honestly. It's the base style in boxing that I like the least. And when you have two outboxers, two fighters like that, you're not going to get a fun fight to watch. You're just not.
Why are we talking about this?
Because it is a fight of some consequence. It is for Alberto Puello's WBC title. Alberto Puello, the unbeaten defending champion in all of this. You could argue that Sandor Martin is a more experienced fighter than Alberto Puello. More fights, more rounds in the bank, against a better quality of competition. He's been in there with some good fighters, and he is a good fighter in his own right.
They both are.
They're both southpaws, too. They both are, both Sandor and Alberto. In what is this battle of the southpaws, they're too similar, these guys. They're too much alike.
If it were two pressure fighters or two boxer punchers, you might get a more interesting, high-octane affair. But two thinking man's fighters? Two thinkers?
Two guys like that don't make for a fan-friendly affair. I suppose it matters quite a bit under what banner this fight will be fought. Will it be fought under the PBC banner? Will it be fought under the Top Rank banner? Because Alberto's with the PBC, Sandor's with Top Rank. He's co-promoted by Top Rank.
Neither guy can be accused of being all that heavy-handed. These are not knockout merchants, so there's a high probability the fight goes to a decision.
If it does, it matters quite a bit who the house fighter is.
Who wins?
It's hard to say. It's a little bit hard to say because if history is any indicator of things to come, these two fighters are at their best when they're boxing and moving, boxing from the outside. But you figure that somebody's going to have to come forward. Somebody's going to have to try to step into their punches and take it to the other guy. They can't spend the whole fight staying away from each other, can they?
Alberto is a little taller and a little longer than Sandor, so maybe Sandor will be the one that steps into his shots, shows some spite.
Because he has to. Since Alberto is a little taller and a little longer, he may hang back, stay behind his jab, at which point Sandor might have to come to him. I'm not sure.
This is not a fight that I'm excited about, but it is a fight of some consequence, so we have to talk about it and see what happens. The WBC title is involved.
They've reached an agreement. Is Top Rank about to truck off Sandor Martin over to the PBC side of things? Because if they do, I don't like his chances. I don't think he can win a points decision on that side of the street. Finally, a day or so ago, His Excellency took to his own social media account and asked, suggest for me 10 fights in boxing you want to see in 2024 and 2025. And as you can imagine, a lot of people responded and volunteered their suggestions, many of them predictable. Fights like Gervonta Davis versus Shakur Stevenson, or Canelo versus Benavidez, Canelo versus Crawford, the usual stuff you see talked about in boxing circles.
Subjects I'm tired of talking about.
Tired of, to the point where I don't even care if those fights happen, and I'm just exhausted from it. I'm fatigued. It's the other divisions and the other fighters that are not quite as talked about that I would like to see Turki.
Get those guys some opportunities.
Work some of that Saudi magic on some of those other divisions that have some of those other fighters, like unified champion Yanibek Alimkhanalai. I would like to see Yanibek Alimkhanalai versus either Carlos Adames or Erslandi Lara in a unification match. That is the winner of Lara versus Garcia.
You still haven't decided who you think wins that fight?
I haven't, because I don't view the PBC as a real boxing outfit. I don't view PBC boxing as real boxing. The amount of effort they've put into getting Danny Garcia this title shot, it strikes me as a red flag. That everything about boxing, nuts and bolts boxing, tells me that Lara should win. He should.
But they've been trying to get Danny Garcia this title shot for over a year, and that strikes me as odd. What's so important about Danny getting to fight Lara?
Why have you been working on that for so long? It's almost like you're trying to put a title in Danny's hands, and we all know that when the powers that be want to put a title in a fighter's hands, it happens. I mean, it's to the point where I wonder if their fights are even real or if they're not preordained, scripted.
Get to the point.
Turki wants some suggestions as to what fights he should make moving forward. I wouldn't mind seeing Yanibek Alimkhanalai versus either Carlos Adames, WBC middleweight champion, or the winner of Lara versus Garcia. Another fight that I wouldn't mind seeing is Christian Mabili versus Bektemir Melenkuziev, provided that Christian takes care of business later on today against Sergey, and I think he's going to. I think he's going to win. I could go for Mabili versus Melenkuziev or Mabili versus Munguia.
Mabili.
Christian Mabili is a high-risk, low-reward fighter, an entertaining fighter to watch, made for TV, but he doesn't have much marquee value. That makes him a high-risk, low-reward opponent to a lot of people that they're not going to fight him unless they stand to make a lot of money. That's where Turki comes in. If Turki can incentivize a fight, offer up the kind of payday you wouldn't normally get to fight Christian Mabili because he doesn't have much marquee value yet. Offer up the kind of payday that Bektemir Melenkuziev or Jaime Munguia wouldn't normally get to fight this fighter so that they can fight this fighter and so that we can get something going at super middleweight, because whenever super middleweight is brought up, what dominates the conversation is Canelo. It's always about Canelo, and I am tired of hearing about and talking about Canelo. There are other fighters there, other fights that can be made. These two.
And they would all be action fights. Mabili's an action fighter, Melakuziev is an action fighter, Munguia is an action fighter. These would be entertaining fights.
Jai Opataya versus Zurdo Ramirez, Jai Opataya versus Chris Billam-Smith, or Jai Opataya versus the winner of Noel Mikhailian versus Ryan Rositsky. Any one of those 3 or 4 fights, any one of them.
In my previous video, I talked about how it might not be a bad idea to bring a tournament format to the sport of boxing, not dissimilar from what we saw in the World Boxing Super Series or the Super 6.
You can do it at cruiserweight. You can do that at cruiser. Remember that what serviced as the launch pad for Naoya Inoue, what serviced as the launch pad for Alexander Usyk was a tournament, the World Boxing Super Series tournament. After those fighters won, their careers benefited from that. So why don't you bring that back with all the cruiserweight champions?
The cruiserweight division could use a tournament right now that there are 4 champions, 4 titles split 4 ways between 4 guys.
There are already some wheels in motion at cruiser for some other fights. Noel Mikhailian versus Ryan Rositsky, Zurdo Ramirez versus former champion Yuniel Dorticos. These are fights that are on the way.
And after those fights take place and those outcomes are decided, see about bringing a tournament to the cruiserweight division.
At heavyweight, I wouldn't mind seeing Turki put together a fight between Jarrell Big Gravy Miller and Dillian Whyte. Dillian is back. Remember, he had his comeback fight a couple of months ago.
Jarrell Miller's coming off a draw with Andy Ruiz. That should have been a win. Dillian Whyte's coming off a win over Christian Hammer.
We know that Jarrell Big Gravy is a talented trash talker, and we know that Dillian Whyte, he's always been the heavyweight division's bad boy. Like it or lump it, Dillian Whyte sells tickets. A fight between these two would grab the paying public's attention in the UK. I could go for that, and I think that's a fight that Turki can make. I decided to be realistic with these suggestions.
Fights that are palpable. Fights that are probable, possible.
Fights that don't involve the usual suspects, the usual prima donnas, as I am tired of seeing the same 4 or 5 fighters dominate the conversation. And there is more that Turki can do for the sport than cater to those just 1 or 2 or 3 guys.
Zile Chang versus Martin Bacoli, or Zile Chang versus Agit Caballel.
Could go for either one of those 2 fights for Zile Chang, shifting the focus to other fighters for other fights that are more realistic.